I don't know if you have ever heard the phrase EGR. You ever heard this? EGR? It stands for Extra Grace Required. So do you have any EGR people in your life? Extra grace required, extra patience required, extra patience required. So there are a lot of EGR people in our world. Matter of fact, your entire life, you're going to encounter EGR people all your life. Some of you are sitting next to an EGR person, but don't make any comment. Let the Holy Spirit do his work, okay? But I read the story about a woman whose brother was one of those people, EGR, extra grace required. He was, even though he was an adult, had his own job, lived on his own, he was constantly going to his older sister, begging her for money and trying to manipulate her into giving him more money. And so many times she would help him out, and many times he wouldn't even say thank you. Very few times did he ever even repay her. And finally she got to the point where she's like, I'm not really helping him. I gotta cut him off. No more helping him financially. He's got his own job. He just spends money stupidly, so he's got to learn. So, of course, the next time it came up, here's what he asked for. I'm not kidding. This is what he asked for. He came to his sister. He said, I need you to loan me all the money to buy a brand new car. A new car. He had a car. It worked fine, but he wanted a brand new car. And so she said no, and he responded with incredible maturity and said, well, thank you for considering it. No, he didn't. No, he didn't respond that way. He told her, and I quote, "You have ruined my life. You have ruined my life. I will not be able to advance in my career now because of you, because I will never be able to attract enough business now that I don't have a new car. And on top of that, I will never be able to get dates because of this old car." Yeah, it's the old car that's causing nobody to want to date you. Maybe it's the fact that you still haven't taken the pacifier out and you're an adult. So, right? Maybe that's what's causing the problem. It's like, oh my goodness. All our lives, we have to deal with extra grace people, EGR, extra grace required people. I mean, you think about all the different categories of people that fit into that. Like, how many of you have people like that? They're just mooches. When they talk to you, you hate to answer the phone because you know they're just calling to ask you for something more. And seldom do they thank you, and seldom are they grateful, and seldom do they repay or even return what you've loaned to them. So it's like, ugh, right? You all have those people at some point season in your life. All of us have extra grace required people. In how many self-absorbed people do you have to interact with? It's all about them all the time. They're never wrong. You're always wrong. You're never right. I mean, exhausting, right? How many of you have to deal with controlling people, manipulative people? People that make you feel really bad about yourself? How many of you deal with critics and people who tear you down on a regular basis? And we've got a lot of extra grace required people in this world, don't we? And one of the most challenging commands Jesus ever gave is directly related to this subject. He said, hey, so now I'm giving you a new commandment, not a new suggestion or idea, a new commandment. Love each other. Just as I have loved you, you should love each other. Matter of fact, in John 15, just a few chapters later, he'll say this again, and then he'll say it again. You know why? Because we don't want to. And we struggle with this. And I can't be the only one who struggles to love the extra grace required people in this world. Right? It's really hard to live out what Jesus said, to love each other. And in another passage, Jesus said, I want you to love your neighbor. And then somebody said, well, who's my neighbor? And Jesus basically tells a story and says, everyone. Everyone's your neighbor. So I want to ask you to think about this. Who is the hardest person for you in your life currently to love? Who's the hardest person? Who comes to mind when you think about difficult people to love? Is it someone at work? Is that the face that pops in your mind? Is it someone at home? A neighbor? A politician? We're entering into the political season. So time to talk about this, right? What does it mean to love them? And we seldom use the word extra grace required. Instead, we use a different word. And so we're finishing a series today called Under Construction. And we're going to talk about how to love a jerk, because that seems to be the word that we use more likely than EGR, right? So Jesus says love them, and we don't really love them. So how do you love people that are difficult to love? I want to ask you to open up your program. Inside, you'll find these notes. Would you grab your notes, grab a pen, something to write with? Welcome, of course, to those who are online watching today. Love to hear the stories about people who are watching. So if you go to our website at penuelchurchlife.com, you can grab these notes for free. Let's jump right into this. So a couple of things we want to say about this today. The very first thing you have to do is change the way you label them. And yes, I labeled them a jerk on purpose. So it's what we use, it's language we use, but it's not the way we should be going. But we have to change the way that we label people. The wrong label will allow us to justify not loving people. So this is really significant. Last week we did a message on the power of our words, and in that message there was something that when I was telling the story, I'm like, oh my goodness, we're going to have to talk about it this week too. So we talked a little bit about this horrible scene in 2017. Remember the story of this shooter went up in the tower? He fired 1,000 bullets into the crowd, the concert goers, killed 60 people, wounded over 400. I mean, just one of the most horrific scenes in American history. Just a horrible thing. Afterwards, a CBS executive came out and said, I don't feel sorry for the people that were killed there. Because it was a country music concert, and most of the country music goers are Republicans. So, she didn't care. I mean, stunning words. She was fired. She immediately started getting death threats, which you would imagine, right? Ignore the Republican Democrat, because I promise you I can stand here and tell stories the other way. I promise you. But Republicans who hate Democrats and Democrats who hate Republicans. And just the label alone is what I want you to focus on. The label allowed her to dehumanize these human beings who had been shot and killed that day. They are no longer humans. They're Republicans. They're no longer humans, they're Democrats. It's the label that's the problem. You know, last week we used it as an example of the power of your words. Those words spoken out loud got her fired, got her to receive death threats. But the reality is, Jesus said, do you know where your words come from? Jesus said they come from your heart. The real problem wasn't here. The real problem was what was in her heart. And the problems are revealed by the labels that we use, and we do this all the time. We label people, and the moment we put a label on them, it allows us to dehumanize them. And we're justified in treating them any way we want to. Like if I label you as a jerk, if I label you as an idiot, if I label you as a narcissist, if I label you as a selfish human being, I'm now justified in treating you according to the label. And it is the place where we have to start. If you're going to love the difficult ones in this world, you have to keep in mind the labels that God uses. Take a look at what the Bible says. Now, these are written for Christians, but they apply to all humans. Colossians 3:12, as God's chosen people, it says, holy, and if you have your pen, underline those last two words, dearly loved. That's what I want you to focus on. The first part of every human being that you will ever encounter is that they are dearly loved by God. They may not be dearly loved by you, but they are dearly loved by God, every single human being. The second part of this, though, is from Ephesians 2:10, where it says, more than that, not only they're dearly loved by God, they are God's masterpiece. Every human being you meet. And when he made them, it says he created us anew in Christ Jesus so that we can do the good things he planned for us long ago. The reality is God's purpose for them is to bring them into his family, that's what he wants, so that he can use them in this world to do the good things he has planned for them. They are a one-of-a-kind creation of God, period. Unique. And God has a special plan for them here on earth. So here is the label that we're supposed to put on every human being we meet. This person is dearly loved by God. They are his masterpiece and created by God to fulfill his special purpose in this world. Is that the label you have on every human being in your life? To see the power of this, I want you to try it this week. I want you to really think about that person that you struggle to love the most. And Christians, we play these little word games all the time. We're like, well, it's not that it's not that I don't love them. I just don't like them very much. And we say that all the time. It's like, because we know it's wrong not to love them. No. Like is here, love is here. If you don't like them, you don't love them. Don't play these little word games. You want to see how powerful this is. I remember when I learned this, it was about 15 years ago. I learned this concept about giving people the right label, and right after I learned it, I was standing in a Quick Trip, and I was waiting to check out, and the person in front of me stunk. I mean, B.O. Bad. And they weren't healthy, and they were buying a whole bunch of not healthy stuff to encourage their non-healthiness. And you can't control your very first thought, right? My first thought was judgy. My first thought were unkind. You can't control your first thought, but you're totally in control of your second thought. So I put in my mind the right label for that person standing in front of me that day. I literally said in my mind to them, I said, this person is dearly loved by God. Dearly loved. They're a masterpiece of His creation. And He put them on earth because He has a special plan for them and wants to partner with them to change this world. Oh my goodness. Do you know how your attitude is transformed when that's the label you put on a human being? So think about the people that you struggle with the most today. For some of you, you only have to think of one person at work and immediately, you do not like them. You're not even going to pretend you don't love them. You're not even close to love. You don't even like them. It's that person at work, or it's your boss, or it's your neighbor, or it is a family member. Someone who's really hurt you. What label do you have on them? Remember the challenge. Jesus' challenge to us. Love everyone. You will not love someone until you label them the way God has them labeled. And if all you remember about that label is dearly loved, that'll do it. They are dearly loved by God. Put that label on the people that you struggle to love. But not only do we need to change our label, we also need to change our lists. So the second thing to do is we need to learn to start focusing on their positives. Oh, what a challenge. Oh my goodness. Focus on the positives of the people that you really don't like. Because what happens, and you all know this, again, think about that person you really don't love, right? What are you focused on? You're going to focus on all the mean things they've said to you or done to you or to people you love. You're focused on their bossy demeanor or their controlling nature, or you're focused on their awful language, or you're focused on how they treat people or treat you, right? You're focused on all the list of all the negatives. It's normal, and it's what we do all the time, is that we allow our brains, we train our brains to see only the negative in the people around us, especially when their habits kind of ding us. It happens in marriages all the time, right? Happens in marriage all the time. All of a sudden, we're in a marriage, and all of a sudden, we love, but then all of a sudden, this kind of bothers me, and pretty soon, all we can see is the negative. I heard about a bunch of wives who got together one day, and they'd had this meeting all the time, and they decided to do a whole series of classes for their husbands. They came in with 5 weeks of classes for their husbands. Here were the 5 weeks. Week 1 class, it was called the toilet paper roll. Does it change itself? Week 1. Week 2 class was, is it possible to urinate using the technique of lifting the seat and avoiding the floor, walls, and nearby bathtub? Week 3 was fundamental differences between the laundry hamper and the floor. Pictures and graphics included. Week 4 was dinner dishes. Do they wash themselves? So examples on video. And then the final week was, is it genetically possible to sit quietly while your spouse is driving? So that was week 5. Right? And so what happens is, that's exactly what happens. You get into the relationship, and all of a sudden, all the things about the other person you don't like become the focus, right? You literally can train your brain to see only the negative in the people around you. If you think about the person you love the least in life, I bet if I said, tell me the 10 things you don't love about him, 10? That's all you want? But if I said, tell me 10 things that you really appreciate or admire about them. You see the problem, right? The list that we maintain in our lives is toxic to love. You cannot let your brain label someone and then make a list in your brain about all the things you don't like about them and love them. Makes sense, right? Can't do that. So I showed you this verse last week. I want to show it again. Do not let any unwholesome talk come out of your mouths, but only what is, look, what are we supposed to be saying to others? Helpful for building others up. If I'm going to give a list to the people I don't like that build others up, is that list going to be all the things about them I don't like? Is that going to work? They're going to feel built up after I'm done? It's not going to work. You all know that. We have to shift our focus. We have to realize that even with the people that we really disagree with, I mean, this is perfect for political season, right? Even with the party on the other side of you, there are things about them that you can affirm. There are positives. We're just so not used to thinking like this. But the reality is there are positives. Even in conflict situations, this is really powerful. I saw this about, a long time ago. I used to work with this guy who was so good at this. One time, this woman asked to meet with us. She was really, really mad at me, and so my friend was there. He was going to kind of be a mediator. And so this woman started off, and she's like, here, I don't like this about Brian, I don't like this, and she just listed all these things about me she didn't like, and I was seething. Because a lot of it wasn't true, and a lot of it was kind of like overstated. Some of it was true. It's like, that's how it is when you're mad at somebody. It's got everything. And I was getting mad, and I'm like locked and loaded, waiting for her to stop talking so I can set her straight. Thankfully, for whatever reason, I paused. For whatever reason, I don't still know why I did. And gave my friend, the mediator, an opportunity to speak. And he brilliantly started with what he could affirm from what she said. The positives. He said things like, I bet I can hear from what you're saying that you really care about these issues. I can hear from what you're saying that this stuff here really matters to you. And he was able to list some of the positives. He didn't ignore the negatives. We got to those later. But he started with what was it that he could affirm in what she had just said. You should have watched her body language. What do you think it did to her body language when she felt heard? I mean, it just drained the anger out. We had the most amazing conflict conversation I'd ever seen. It's incredibly powerful. Listen, you cannot love people and label them and have lists about the things that you don't love about them. You've got to make the pivot in your mind. You've got to think about the people that you struggle to love the most, and I'm going to challenge you to do something that will not feel normal to you. I'm going to challenge you to make a list of what you like about them. What do you like about them? If you're super political and you have your party and you can't stand the other party, then this is for you. What is it that you like about them? Because for many people in America right now, the people they hate the most, they don't love the most, are on the other side politically. We diminish their humanity, and then we wonder why we have garbage like this in our society. We label and we list and we make the wrong lists. I tell you, sometimes I tell you this, once in a while when I'm teaching, I'm just teaching for myself. I needed this reminder. There are people in my life that have hurt me, who I have put labels on, and that I have made lists of all the things about them I don't like. And sitting down this week, being aware of it, shifting the label, making the new list, transformed my attitude. Totally changed it. I was around one of those people this week that I don't love, and where I felt bitterness and anger and tension for so long, I literally was sitting with him, I felt nothing. That part was gone. It's like God steps in and helps us love even the people we can't love on our own. So make a new list. Because the command from Jesus isn't to like people, it's to love them. And to love everyone. So we put the right label. This is a person who's dearly loved by God, a masterpiece of his creation, here for a special purpose with God. And I'm going to make a list, not of the things I don't like about him, but of the things that I admire and respect and that I do like about him, because I want to build him up, right? And then the third thing, the only other thing we're going to get to today is this: I have to learn to be more gentle. Oh, gentleness. I had so much more planned, but I'm going to save a big chunk of it for a future message. But this is so important. I read, as I was prepping this week, I read about a woman who was teaching her children in children's church, and she made them sit down and write a prayer out to God. What question would you like to pray to God? And this little girl is 4 years old. Her name was Anna, and she wrote this. She said, "Dear God, I bet it's very hard for you to love all of everybody in the whole world. There are only 4 people in our family, and I could never do it." Right? Sometimes it feels like that, right? But can you imagine that? I mean, for us, it's a challenge, but the truth is, God is love. He loves all the people in the whole world equally. The people you hate, he loves. The people you don't like, he loves. And not just a little bit. What's the word? Dearly loves. He dearly loves them. And this is the command, this is the challenge, is to move in the direction of this. And so the Bible has some really specific things to say about this. Look at this. Always, we could spend, and I bring this verse up a lot because it's so convicting to me, always be humble and always be gentle. Let me ask you, are you always gentle? Are you always gentle? Are you gentle with somebody who has a differing political view than you are? Are you gentle when somebody doesn't treat you the right way? Are you gentle when somebody doesn't treat your kids the right way? Are you always humble and gentle? And then he goes on to say why. He says this: I want you to learn to be patient with each other, making allowance for each other's faults, and the last 4 words are the key: because of your love. So if you are not patient and not making allowance for each other's faults, what's missing is love, right? It's because of love that I'm patient when you hurt me, when you ding me. Because this is not just how I should be treating others, this is how God treats me, right? Isn't it true that God is patient with me, making allowance for my faults because of his love for me? Isn't that 100% true? Is it true for you? Does God ever have to be patient with you? Does God ever have to make allowances for you because of your faults and flaws? And does he do it reluctantly, or does he do it because he loves you? And so this universal principle that he applies to us, he says, this is what I want you to show to the world around you. And it needs to be, so we're changing the way we label them, we're changing the lists we maintain in our mind, and now we're changing the way we treat them. We're going to treat them with humility, which we're going to get to in a future message, kindness, which we'll get to later, and gentleness. So we're going to treat them with gentleness. And we underestimate so much the power of a gentle response. Look at our society. Do we do gentle when we disagree with someone? Go read social media. Are we gentle? I'm amazed how many people are trying to convince everybody by harsh signs that they paint and hang up in their front yards. It's like, what do you think is happening here? Your cruelty on a sign is really going to transform somebody's behavior? We literally believe it in America. We believe that anger and hostility and coming at people aggressively is going to change them. And God the whole time is saying, well, try the tactic I use, which is gentleness. You ever heard of Aesop's fables? This man used to write these stories a long, long time ago, and they always had a principle. This is probably the one that most people know, the tortoise and the hare. Remember this story, the tortoise and the hare? So that was from Aesop. Well, he also wrote another one. He wrote a lot of them. One of them he wrote was an argument that happened one day between the wind and the sun about who could influence people more. And the wind was a big blustery, I can change people's behavior. You watch it. And the wind said, see that guy down there, that old man with his coat? He said, I can get him to take that coat off faster than you can. And the sun said, okay. The sun went behind a cloud, and the wind started out, and he started blowing. He's going to blow that off there, right? He's going to blow it off. But the stronger he blew, the more the man held tighter to his coat. And so he was blowing incredibly hard, almost knocking the guy down, but he gripped that coat even tighter and tighter and tighter, and finally the wind acknowledged, I failed, I can't do it, I quit. And then the sun's turn, and the sun came out from behind the clouds. And in Aesop's story, he smiles on the elderly man in the coat. And a couple of minutes later, that man is, dabbing his forehead, and he takes his coat off. And the point of the story is the sun is shown with kindness and gentleness. We are always stronger than force. Always stronger than force. Look around. Is anyone being convinced in our society by the rhetoric and the force and all the postings on social media? We're not changing anybody. But the force that God uses when he wants to change people is kindness and gentleness. This is the force that disarms people. It changes people's lives. Last year I heard the most amazing example of this. And I shared it one other time, but it's still one of my favorite examples of what we're talking about here. This man's name is Qasim Rashid. He was in 2020 running for Congress down in Virginia. Deep South, Bible Belt, and Qasim Rashid was running for Congress. So can you imagine what it was like for this Muslim man in the Deep South to be running for a congressional spot? Do you know the verbal abuse he took? The anger, the hatred, and the animosity. He was constantly on the butt end of the receiving end of horrible humor about him. One man who really went over the line was a man named Oscar Dillon. He tweeted out, and the gist of it was not only that he is not welcome in America, but then he went after his religion and just was profane. And so he read it, and he was deeply hurt. So how do we respond when people hurt us, right? We come back at him, right? And he was already, he said, to go back after Mr. Dillon. But then he started scrolling through Oscar Dillon's posts, and all of a sudden he saw that Oscar was in the middle of a big crisis at home. His wife was seriously ill, had been through lots of medical treatments. It wasn't working. Oscar posted that he had drained his entire retirement account, and now he was about to start draining his wife's entire retirement account just to try and get her the medical help that she needed to survive. And he had started a GoFundMe page. Nobody had given. And when Qasim read that, his humanity took over. Remember, we want to humanize, not dehumanize. And so he went on Oscar Dillon's GoFundMe page and gave him $55. And then he sent a note to his 290,000 followers. And he said, here's the situation. Would you all go and donate? And in a very short time, they raised over $20,000 for this man's medical bills. I never heard how far it actually got. I knew it got to $20,000. Well, when Oscar Dillon saw all of this happening, he reached out to Qasim and he asked to meet with him. And they met together, and the very first thing that Oscar Dillon said was, "I'm sorry." And after a long conversation, he said, if you want to, you can put your election sign up in my yard. I'm not going to vote for you, but you can put it up in my yard. See, we think that the way to change people is to bluster and to blow like the wind. What transformed this relationship? gentleness, kindness, because it's consistent with love. The power to change this world is in the power of love. So I have to get the right label in my mind on every human being. If you forget everything else, just remember every human being you're going to meet is always dearly loved by God. You may not love them for their behavior, and you may not love them for their words, and you may not love them for the way they treat others, but that in no way stops God from dearly loving them and wanting to use them in a special way in this world. So a couple of things as we finish up today. I want you to think about, again, the person that you struggle to love the most. Who do you struggle to love the most? And maybe more than one. There's more than one in my life. More than one. And I want you to think today, what labels have you put on them? Sit down this week and write a letter that you're not going to send to them, okay? Just a short little thing. Say, put their name down, talk about what they've done, and then that's caused you so much pain, and then put a new label on them. I choose to look at you this way, that you are dearly loved by God. And then make yourself start to make a list of the positive traits in their life and put that down. You can make the other list, right? I know it. How they've hurt you, how they've hurt your family. I know you can make that list. Can you make that one? Is God a liar? Did he really create them with no purpose in this world, so no positive traits? I'm pretty sure he's not a liar. You're just not thinking about it. Make yourself think about it. And really think about what is the most gentle response that you could give when you're around them. How can you be kind even when they're not? Was Jesus kind when people weren't? Do you know what Jesus said as he hung dying on a cross? You know his prayer to his Father? Father, forgive them, they don't even know what they're doing. Was that kind and gentle in the face of violence? Jesus is our model. Let me have you bow your heads. You know, Jesus is amazing. The fact that we are dearly loved despite what we've done and what we've said and how unloving we've all been in our lives is just a staggering thought. You are unconditionally loved by God. Do you know that? There is nothing you can ever do that will make him love you more than he loves you right now. Nothing. And there's nothing you'll ever do that will make him love you less than he loves you. You are completely 100% loved by this God. And the proof of how much he loves you is what he has done. Jesus came into the world not to just be a good teacher, but like we said, to allow himself to be nailed to a cross. He allowed that to happen. He was God the Son. He could have stopped it at any moment. But there had to be some punishment paid for the unloving acts of this world, and Jesus paid the price. You break a law, there's always a consequence, and all of us are lawbreakers. So Jesus took our consequences. Then he rose again. And now, with his love and power, he offers every human being the same gift. If you want it, you can be completely forgiven and made new with Jesus Christ. So if this is what you want, with your head bowed, your eyes closed, you can say, Jesus, I'm turning to you today. Please, forgive me. Pay my price today. Come and make your home inside of me. I want to receive your kindness and love into my life. In Jesus' name, amen. As we finish up today, can I ask you all to grab your card out of your program? Even if you're a regular tender, I ask you to do this every week. Just put your name down, let us know you're here. Some of you may have prayed and asked Jesus to forgive you or renewed your commitment. Let us know about that. If there are things you want us to pray about, just let us know. There's a place where you can write down your prayer requests. And then what you do is drop this in one of the 2 offering boxes back on the back wall where you came in. Thanks so much for coming. We will not see you next Sunday, remember. So see you in 2 weeks for our Sunday Fun Day, where we will have Sundays.